The Vegas Eternal have immortalized themselves in Overwatch League history as the third team ever to have a winless season. Congrats, Vegas Eternal, you're joining the ever so exclusive club only held by the 2021 LA Valiant and the infamous 2018 Shanghai Dragons. How embarrassing. The players weren't exactly in a position to succeed, but in general, from a org perspective, this is unacceptable and it is pathetic. Luckily for Vegas Eternal though, they might have saved themselves from further embarrassment, either because the league ends up going away after this year or them potentially folding as an org. If there was a world where the league continued and they stuck around for another year with the same structure they have in place, they would most certainly surpass the Dragons for the longest losing streak in Overwatch League history. If you go back to last year, they haven't won a game since June 2022, and since then they have lost a consecutive 32 games in a row. It's been 14 months since these guys have sniffed victory. Like, come on, man. This is just absolutely embarrassing, and it's a shame that they have to represent the Overwatch League. This org being here brings great shame and embarrassment to us all. Not just the org and their fans and the people controlling it behind the scenes. This goes to everyone. It makes this entire league as a whole look bad by fielding such an incredibly incompetent organization. Since making roster changes last season and bringing in an entire new core, they've only come close to winning a game like 2, maybe 3 times at most, with only a couple of map 5s in their resume. The incompetence and the horrible management and decision making goes back so far as well. Just thinking about this year, they fielded an awful roster, they decided to make changes midway through in a panic, but it came way too late, and then for the cherry on top, due to their own incompetence in-game, they choked away a game against the Valiant that they had firmly in their grasp. They had it, it was right there, man, but then they decided to have their coaching incompetence come through by subbing out their carry knife, and everything went downhill from there, and we know the rest. That was their only chance to win, and it completely broke them, even though they literally had that one in the palm of their hand. They gave it away to a homeless person on the streets. And at least from a score perspective, this is the only match they've even come close to winning. Out of 16 tries, this is what they have to show. One game where they pushed a team to the brink. And mind you, this is a team that is trying even less than they are to win games and take care of their players. The Valiant straight up are just the players and paintbrush and no one else even cares. They couldn't even find the passwords to their Twitter account, for crying out loud. And let's not forget about how, as an Overwatch League team, they lost to Sympathy in World Cup trials. Like, that just speaks for itself on how this kind of season was going to go for them. Luckily, things got better from a talent perspective when they decided to make these random changes to potentially save their butts, but let's be honest, it was mostly because things were getting overwhelmingly toxic, and they were panicking because they knew they were likely going to go winless. There was never any control. There was never any structure, and really, what we see here, what ended up happening with this history, it's deserved. The players definitely don't deserve it. They deserve way better for having to deal with this, but from what the org did and their point of view, yeah, this is deserved. They paved the way for this. Coming into just this year alone, they thought it was a bright idea to literally not change anything, make no additions whatsoever, even after losing so badly in the Pro-Am. And to Samito's team, they said, screw it, we ball, we can work with this, it'll be fine. But they ended up having no good help at tank, and arguably the worst flex DPS we've seen, or at least one of the worst, in Malthal. And mind you, they got rid of other people during the offseason who have since left that team played a lot better, or at least somewhat better. Think about Crowie, not amazing by any stretch, but has shown a lot more life in a better system on the Los Angeles Valiant. And what about Wub? After leaving Vegas, after getting kicked off, he went back to Hitscan, and he's been doing great in contenders. But apparently they were the problem, and now they just get to sit back and laugh because they know that they were right, and their potential is being completely hindered by being on this horrible organization. It's no coincidence. Then you add in a coach who had no previous Overwatch League experience experience and was on her own fending for herself with no other analyst or assistant coach to help her along the way with a struggling team against literally the best competition in the world. Now, Empress has made her fair share of mistakes, of course, like with the whole knife subbing out situation for literally no reason at all, but she's far from the biggest problem. That much needs to be made certain. Some people may question the validity of her signing, but she wasn't exactly being put in a great position to succeed. And that goes double for the players. They should have made more significant changes during the offseason to begin with. Guys like 2U and Knife would have been nice to have at the beginning of the year, and maybe if they had this roster since the start, things could have been different. But again, you dig yourself into a hole, and then you decide to panic and make a move that you probably should have made way earlier than you did. This organization was literally designed to fail. You can only point to the org in this situation and the higher-ups and the decisions that they've made to pave the way to this the last couple of years. It's on them. Nobody else deserves more blame than they do. And what's sad is, the roots for this were planted literally almost 4 years ago at this point. It goes back to the 2020 offseason when the Paris Eternal had to make the choice to let go of all of their superstar Korean players due to budgeting constraints. At the time, a lot of people felt sympathy and empathy for these guys in this organization, what they'd have to go through, the stress of reconstructing from the ground up out of nowhere with little time and resources. We all felt bad, but that was part of the plan, to have their backs, to feel bad about them, while they behind the scenes were planting the first seed with the whole Ben Best drama that happened. For a while, this got completely overlooked. According to Ben Best and others, after the 2020 season ended and he was looking for a new home, higher-ups made it so it would be basically impossible for him to find a new job by saying some pretty not-so-good things about him behind his back that would just not be favorable for anybody to land a new job, at least at the highest level. What those specifics were, I'm not too sure, but after Ben Best ended up defeating the Vegas Eternal during the 2023 season, he said, "I was waiting for this karma for so long, but this is what you deserve when you lie about players, trash them, ruin careers, and act like an angel on social media. Trying to take the lead alone and fire the people for their influence is so selfish." You know what came of this though? This man had to grind literally for years to make it back here, and he was coming off the best season of his career on the Paris Eternal, where he was actually a respectable tank player, and even so, he wasn't allowed to get a new opportunity, and in his words, it's largely because of what was going on behind the scenes with some bad talk behind his back. But then of course, the pendulum swings back the other way. 2021, Paris Eternal end up having a surprisingly respectable season, where they were pretty competitive and their team was likable and full of some great EU talent to make Paris proud. Things went swimmingly until the offseason came around. Again, more seeds end up getting planted. Get amazed. The current coach of the Justice was one of the frontrunners to win the 2021 Coach of the Year award. He was one of the best in the business. And you know what his reward was for his efforts? He got dropped. His contract was not renewed, and he ended up without a job for a couple of years until getting signed by Washington this year. Avala and whoever else was in charge of making choices decided that it would be better to go with J-Mac. Now, to be fair, he was a good assistant coach for the team beforehand, and he was a coach on the rise for sure, but with how Get Amazed was doing and how he was able to rally that roster and play way above expectations, it was pretty questionable, and needless to say, it quickly blew up in their faces last year when they were absolute garbage. And while he didn't drama farm necessarily, for lack of a better term, like Ben Best, he did say that the Eternal most definitely underestimated his worth, and that he's thankful they did. And who could blame him? Yet again, another example of a person moving on from that org and just having an immensely better career and life. And then last year, we saw it with Naga, the blame game being put on him for pretty much no reason when he obviously was not the biggest problem. He too ended up getting kicked off Eternal, and look what happened. He's living his best life as well, doing other things. And then that would proceed to happen to every other player on the original 2022 roster. They were all gone by the summer. And then this year has basically been a rinse and repeat, but with even less success somehow. And clearly, whatever went on this year also very toxic. I won't get into some of his personal stuff that's been going on recently, but Malthel also had some pretty poor things to say about this org, and in particular their GM. To further add on to the overwhelming evidence, Malthel said that he was happy to be out of a negative environment, and that Avala created her own toxic organization with constant lies, gaslighting, going back on her word, playing victim, etc., and says that he hopes that this helps shed some additional light on the situation that this org's been going through for the better part, well, I guess the worst part, of 3 years. Notice how it seems to happen every single year, where there's at least one guy who's distraught and completely pissed off over what happened, and that they always seem to be in the same exact position, where they're a player or a coach, and they have nothing but bad things to say, or basically hinting at bad things that happen within that org. There's a common denominator here. So many people have complained. So many people have been screwed out of jobs and have been lucky to recover. And it all points to one specific area of this team. There's one spot, one common denominator that always seems to refuse to take any accountability or responsibility for what's happened the last 3 years. It's always somebody else's fault. It's never, ever Avala and the management's fault. No one seems to be stepping forward from the higher-ups. It just doesn't happen. It's always the blame game with other people and panicking to make changes. Oh, we still suck? Time to deconstruct the roster for a 3rd billionth time. It's just ridiculous. It is completely unfair and has tanked this org, going from potentially one of the ones on the rise to one of the least respected in Overwatch League history. What happened here is deserved. This is the organization's fault. They deserve to go 0-16. They deserve to be the laughingstock of the league. They put themselves in this position to begin with, and yet there is no responsibility claimed for their actions, and there is no apologies, no nothing. Radio silence is all we have. One can only hope, with over time, as there's some coping going on in the situation, that somebody's gonna step forward and say something. Bare minimum, an apology is owed to the fan base and to the league as a whole. Not that it does you any good at this point, because we're way past being sorry, but it's the least that we deserve. Paris fans / Vegas fans have been put through the ringer, and most have left. The French fan base has been collectively pissed off over the years by this, and they're disgusted, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them just completely left to begin with. They're not even in Paris anymore. They went to Vegas, which in itself is another reason why this org has gone so downhill. Nothing but choices that have made the entire fan base and all of the workers pissed off. So really, they deserve a spot at that ever so exclusive table with the LA Valiant and the Shanghai Dragons. The level of incompetence and disgusting actions that you've pulled off is on the level of what we saw with those orgs. It is the perfect place for you to be. It's a very fitting title. We all knew this was going to happen. The warning signs were put in place months ago. It's so horrible that everyone had to watch basically a car crash in slow motion where none of us could do anything to stop it. And as we sit here reflecting on this all-time embarrassing moment, I can't help but feel bad for the players. Everybody that was on that roster this year, I feel for you guys. Being in that situation must have been awful. And to the current guys, I mean, man, that's horrible. Poor Knife and Tuyu and Irony, these are well-respected Korean players, and they had to sit here and go through this garbage and be a part of this history unnecessarily. These guys are just trying to make it to the league and have a job and get paid for it, and this is what they get for all of their hard work. Then there's Dove, the unsung hero of this team for a long time before Knife came. We all felt bad for him as he'd carried to no avail over and over and over again, even stretching back to last year as one of the longest tenured players on Vegas to date. Lucky for Dove though, he did manage to squeak out one game before everything took a complete turn for the worst. Not that it's saying much having one Overwatch League win under your belt while having to deal with this organization, but better than Rakattack, I suppose. Rakattack is the guy that this entire community is feeling for right now. Everybody is brokenhearted for him, and I can't even begin to imagine how it must feel to have been in this league for a year plus without a single win. If anyone deserves justice out there, it's him. As we sit back and reflect upon what happened with the Vegas Eternal this year, all we can do is say that Rakattack deserved so much better. He took all of it like a champ. All of this drama, all the losing, all the negativity and just went out there and did his job every day while trying his absolute best to stay positive in the most professional manner possible for a guy going through all that stress. Just looking at him sinking into his chair and that visible despair on his face, oh, it was gut-wrenching. It's so horrible to have to witness such a thing. If you see Rakattack around, be it on social media or maybe on his stream, give this guy some words of encouragement. He deserves all our love and support from this community. Remind him that there are some greener pastures ahead of him and that none of this is his fault and that he shouldn't feel like he should be blamed in the slightest. He's never talked trash. He's never complained. He's just gone out there and tried his best, and that's something that we can all take away in life. That is a valuable life lesson that Rakas taught us on this day, and we should appreciate what he's doing, being such a great example to this community, and we can only pray that greater things are ahead of him, as well as everybody else that's had to suffer through this organization, both in past and present. Congrats, Vegas. You've caused despair for countless victims. Your punishment for these crimes? An eternal stay in the meme factory. The Valiant and Dragons were just starting to get bored of each other. Your company is perfect timing. Honestly, you deserve even worse than this. This doesn't even begin to repent for your sins. I guess 0-16 will have to suffice. Good riddance.